Today's conversation is going to be all about build for rent as an innovation sandbox for the broader home building industry. Before I introduce our facilitator and our panelists, I just want to give you a quick background on the Housing Innovation Alliance, just in case you're new to us or this is the first time you're able to join one of our sessions. Click. All right. So who are we? The Housing Innovation Alliance is a future-oriented organization looking at how we can identify opportunities for innovation in the residential market. And when we say that, we talk about product opportunities and low density construction. So anything thinking about 12 to 16 units per acre. We are a strong representation of stakeholders across the entire construction ecosystem. And our focus is how do we deliver a more attainable housing solution for middle income families with those the product density that I mentioned. Today's conversation is all about build for rent as an innovation sandbox. So there's been a lot of talk in the market. I know Brad's provided a few, let's say, video clips leading into this session, and he's going to provide us with a quick market overview that really talks about how hot this market or this investment is. We've seen a lot in the news over the past few years about this. It's something that we've paid close attention to for just over a decade. And I see George Casey in the attendee list, and he's our chairman and been somebody who's been supporting this for a long time as an alternative path for residential builders. So today we're going to speak with a few experts from the industry to better understand what's being explored, what are some of the barriers, and how can we work together to overcome those barriers and capture some of these opportunities. Just some quick housekeeping. So we do recommend that you engage in this conversation throughout the course of the panel. So happy to have you adding any questions or comments into the chat box. I'll be working with Meg and our team to pull those out as appropriate throughout the course of the discussion, and certainly Brad, I'm sure, will be referencing it as well, so that we can get those comments worked in to the dialogue. When you do this, please make sure that you click to share with everyone so that we can all see it and it doesn't just get sent straight to the panelists. I mentioned that we represent a strong cross section of the entire construction ecosystem. We are about 200 members strong, so that's 200 companies across the country that are helping support our innovation initiatives. There's a special subset of our member network called our partners. These are the 28 companies listed on this slide today. I just want to give them an extra special thank you, because it's their support and their financial underwriting that helps us do what we do on a day-to-day basis and engage our industry and help move the needle in adopting some of these new concepts and technologies. So just want to say thanks to all of them. And then last but not least, I want to get right into the conversation here. So I'm joined today by three big supporters of the Housing Innovation Alliance. So great to have them all here. I think this is a returning opportunity for everybody out there. So glad to see them. So first, I'll just quickly introduce each of them, and then I'm going to hand the mic over to our maestro, Brad Hunter, who'll be taking us through today's conversation. So first up, Brad Hunter of Hunter Housing Economics. Brad has been at the forefront of what's been going on in the build for rent market segment, conducting a variety of reports across the Sun Belt and other markets, including some for those I see in the attendee list today. So happy to have you, Brad, and look forward to your market analysis. And next up, we have Jeff Hoppenbeck, based out of Denver, Colorado. Jeff is the CEO and founder of Simple Homes. Simple Homes, it provides an integrated structural solution using a Swedish-inspired panelization technology. So Jeff's this company's just about 3 years old now, started right before the pandemic, and things have just been booming, but he's been actively involved in a lot of the things that we're working on. Excited to hear your side of the story here today, Jeff. And Kelly Lawrence. So Kelly's been a big supporter of ours out of the Midwest. Kelly runs Onyx and East, which is established in 2015 and is a full service home builder serving Midwest markets and select markets in Florida. So welcome, Kelly. Glad to have you. So with that, Brad, I'm gonna get out of the way and let you run with it. Love to get your perspective on where the market's at today, some of the opportunities and some of the hurdles we're running into, and then run the call with the team.
Sure. Thanks, Dennis. Great to have everyone on. So one of the big challenges in housing nowadays is, of course, having enough housing that is appropriate for young families and desired by young families. And with interest rates starting to go up at a dramatic pace and expected to continue to go up, we think that more of these young families are going to have to look at rental options. The built for rent industry has come along just in time to meet that need. The builders by and large, public builders have not addressed the needs of starter families throughout this whole cycle, with some exceptions. D.R. Horton with Express Homes has certainly targeted that segment and done a very good job of it, but most of the production is not for that segment. And yet we see a surge in household formation rates. People are starting families, they're having babies 10 years later than prior generations. The millennials are finally starting to have children, and then they want to live in the suburbs. So there is this famous gap. There's a discussion as to whether it's 5 million or 4 million or 1 million. I tend to think it's closer to the 1 million mark, but there is a gap. There is a shortage of housing, especially, as I said, for those young families. And now that built for rent has reached a scale that is big enough that it can now become the incubator and testing ground for new innovations in residential development. That's really what drives our discussion today as we talk about innovation and the built for rent causing the tipping point, or really kind of a fulcrum for that. Innovations in residential development, such as community design, how these communities are laid out. There's some new styles that have come out since 2012. Smart home technology, solar, 3D printing technology, and then all of this, of course, feeds into the ESG aspect of investment and development too, doing well by doing good. And then, of course, modular and panelized construction methods will come into the discussion as well. So let me start with Kelly. Kelly, you at Onyx and East do a lot of built for rent, and you use sometimes a panelized construction method, right? Tell us a bit about your experience with that, and are you delving deeper into modular?
Sure. Yes, we do. We use panelized construction, excuse me, for all of our wood frame construction. So throughout the Midwest and certain parts of Florida, and we've used that for many years, on our for sale business line, and then it's just natural to continue to use panelized construction in our build for rent product type, as we're especially keenly focused on our cycle time in all of those communities. So again, big believer in that. We have explored multiple modular and offsite construction solutions. I think for us, we have not found, particularly in the geographies we serve and looking for producers, that we're minimizing the transportation costs involved with some of those offsite solutions. Haven't found someone that I think can commit the production capacity that meets kind of our development pipeline. So while I'm a firm believer in modular and offsite construction as a long-term innovation for the housing industry and solution, we've struggled just to find the capacity in the system. So again, we continue. I feel like every year we continue to see if there is a new solution out there that we feel like can deliver on the cycle time reductions and some of the quality considerations that make it so attractive. And again, just struggling to find that capacity in the system.
Well, you guys are definitely at the forefront of that, and I take my hat off to you. Anybody that wants to learn more about what they do at Onyx and East, please visit their website. And so you're talking about reducing cycle time, and I know that's something that Jeff also talks about quite a bit. Jeff, tell us about the simple homes method. It's fascinating to me. And what kind of savings on cycle time can be achieved with your method of construction?
Yeah, for sure. So we build using a panelized building system. It's I'd say a panelized building system that's just kind of a click above in terms of level of finish versus most folks in the market. So we build very large exterior wall panels up to 36 feet long by 11 feet tall. We use zip on pretty much every project. So we pre-tape the seams and then we pre-install windows in the factory as well. We also pre-build floor cassettes, roof panels as well. We're bringing in-house truss manufacturing, and then we provide all of that as a turnkey service. So we manufacture all of our own components, and then we're ultimately a turnkey framer in this market. And so we, overall, with the combination of our building system that's just a little bit higher level of finish, and then the fact that we own the labor end to end, we're able to realize anywhere from 50 to 80% cycle time reduction in terms of framing, and we're
That's
able
incredible.
to deliver that quite consistently. And so I think that that's been, as we've made this push into build for rent and have signed some pretty large projects recently, that is, I think, particularly attractive to developers and to general contractors and home builders who are working with there. Both the consistency that an approach like ours, or more industrialized approach, can bring, as well as the actual kind of raw numbers in terms of being able to lease those units up faster.
Well, that's the name of the game. And in our company, we do market studies all over the country for build for rent. And one of the things that we are consistently seeing and hearing is that the build for rent developments are leasing as fast as units can be built and delivered. So reducing that cycle time is absolutely critical for the bottom line and for the profitability of these projects. And 50 to 80% reduction in cycle time on the framing part is fantastic. Does it also help you to get around the lumber shortages, and how does it affect inspection pass rates too?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say a few things there. I mean, in terms of lumber, I think that that's definitely something that we are able to bring. Is we're become pretty adept partners at working with our customers to figure out the right solution to manage just the craziness in the lumber market. So we do a lot of pre-purchase and storage because we are a lumber yard ourselves. And so I think that that's one thing that's led folks to work with us. And then, yes, in terms of pass rates and quality, I mean, that's just one of the greatest advantages of any kind of offsite solution. I think the other interesting thing I'd just highlight in terms of both cycle time reduction and kind of innovation more generally, and thinking of this area as a sandbox, is it's been interesting having conversations with a number of our customers in terms of trialing new wall assemblies. For example, we build a lot of townhome built for rent here in Denver. And the shaft liner is one of the slowest parts that slows us down a lot with our prefab system. And so there's been a greater interest in saying, can we try other assemblies there in this context, using it as a sandbox that potentially results in even greater cycle time reduction that some of our customers might not be willing to try in a for sale context. They'll say, yeah, we'll try 2 1-hour walls in this context, so you guys can fully prefab in the factory and cut a week off that framing time for that townhome building. So it's been interesting kind of to spurn some of those conversations that we don't necessarily have in our kind of production single family world.
Great. Well, this one's up for grabs. Solar energy. What kinds of reductions in operating costs for a built for rent development can be realized through the use of solar? And is that sort of hot water oriented, or is it photovoltaic? And so what are your general comments on that, anybody?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had the exact numbers. I think that we're evaluating that right now. But again, that is an area where we really had not considered introducing solar within our for sale business line, but build for rent, thinking about different, just different metrics, long-term operating costs, things of that nature. It's really interesting to consider, especially in Florida, the use of solar in a wide range of things. So we're looking at your traditional more solar roof panels to solar HVAC units. There's some really interesting technology in that area, looking at, solar, making sure all of our common area lighting is solar. So we're really evaluating solar in particular in a way we never have done before. Because of our build for rent product line, and I see it being broadly considered throughout our business.
Okay, what about you, Jeff? Do you have a point of view on solar?
Not too much, since we're really focused on our scope of work. I do think that in our market, solar is pretty common, particularly with a lot of the builders who we work with. A lot of whom kind of target the zero energy ready standard through the DOE. I do think that it'd be interesting to see kind of whether there's some economies of scale when you're thinking about a solar installation across 200 plus rooftops all at once, Can you bend that cost curve down a little bit? And because I think my general perspective on solar is that we're relatively close from like a payback, the payback perspective is getting better. And I think that, if you can bring down that cost curve a little bit, and then, you already have the cost curve coming down on the products themselves, you might be able to start making projects pencil that, would maybe make sense in for sale contacts, do all that.
Yeah. And there's some companies that'll sort of set up the equipment and kind of partner with a developer to make it more of a way to augment income in addition to the rental income. Well, let me switch over to smart home tech, and I'll start with Kelly, and then ask Jeff, what smart home tech are you putting in your houses, particularly the built for rent ones? And then, is it video doorbells, smart garage doors, leak detectors, thermostats? What are the kinds of things that you're focusing on?
Yeah, so it's really all of the above. We're really focused. We've partnered with Pretium and Progress as the management arm for our initial launch in the built for rent side. And while we'll have a bit of a hybrid during a lease up period, it really is more of a technology focused management solution that those smart home features, from doorbell to garage door to thermostat, smart plugs and controls, are all part of being able to have more of a regionalized, kind of an offsite management approach that's very heavy in technology, providing really, our goal is really to provide a for sale neighborhood environment. So not having your traditional, leasing center and staff but obviously need to provide the level of service and maintenance and care for the homes that residents deserve. So, all of those smart home features are critical to being able to deliver the management and maintenance services.
Looks like Kelly's connection's getting unstable. Jeff, what are your thoughts on smart home?
Yeah, I think, I'm a data junkie, and so I think part of what excites me about that is the data opportunity, and could some of those insights that are being captured in a built for rent context, where you have single management and a centralized sort of ingestion point in terms of that data, could those then drive incremental insights in terms of how we think about kind of product planning on the for sale side? Understanding, consumer behaviors in a little bit deeper way. I think it's kind of an unknown at this point, but to me, that's, there's the potential to generate a number of very, very large data sources that, we don't have today within the single family for sale context. And I think that some of those insights can be applied kind of across the board.
Okay. I also want to remind everyone, if you have questions, that we will go ahead and start fielding those pretty soon, anybody in the audience. So let me ask you this question for either one of you. When you're seeking entitlements, can tech somewhat streamline the process of getting those entitlements? How would that work?
I haven't seen tech on entitlements move the needle. I do think, we were just chatting about solar. And I think broadly, as we think about sustainability within our site and product design for built for rent, which again, given just the different lens we're viewing this product type, that we've seen that as a benefit in the entitlement process. So, we're seeking green building certification for all of our homes in our built for rent communities. And again, introducing some of these green and sustainable technologies. And that's really important for communities to know that we're committed to that, and we're introducing those features into a rental product, which is typically we meet the normal NIMBY response often in the entitlement process. So I think that side of it does absolutely help to get our projects over the goal line.
Good. Okay. Well, we do have a question from George Casey. and he says he'd love to hear how you guys approach lowest initial cost versus the lowest life cycle cost in speccing out your homes. It seems that Built for Rent values the latter. Where do you see the biggest difference in products in Built for Rent versus for sale? Is it an HVAC, appliances, finishes? And I guess
I would say for us, we definitely are looking at balancing the life cycle costs, which with our upfront building costs, and I would say there's kind of a mixed bag in terms of what wins in each product category in that regard. But I think we are looking at some different finishes, hard surface flooring throughout. The appliance specs are a little bit higher end. We're including refrigerators, for example, and we wouldn't include those, but we don't ever include washer and dryers, which we sometimes would include. So there's some just oddities in that regard, but we definitely are balancing the long-term operational cost in kind of our product design with the upfront building costs. And I think for us, we really think that there's an opportunity in Built for Rent generally for the I have a long history in the more traditional multifamily space, which definitely is segmented into different property types. Our goal is really to be kind of a Class A Built for Rent developer and provider. And so, I think for us, it's not just low cost, because we really think as the industry matures in segments, we really want to be in that type of position. So it is a balancing act for sure.
Yeah, I guess I'll pile on a little bit. I mean, I think we have seen that a little bit overall. I think an investment, a willingness on the part of our customers in this space compared to some of our production single family builders to invest a little bit more upfront. One I'd say example there is, which we haven't spec'd yet on a project, but we've got a couple that look like they probably will, is pre-finished siding. Since we do full rough carpentry services as part of what we provide, that's something that does have an upfront cost implication. I frequently can kind of net out. I think it makes a ton of sense from a labor perspective, from a time perspective, but there's an incremental dollar there typically upfront, and we've seen a willingness on the part of kind of Built for Rent community to look at that, in part due to cycle time, and then in part due to just the operational impacts of being able to have something with a 30+ year, warranty, and not knowing that that's not something that has to be worried about from an operational expense perspective, as opposed to like, it's going to be fine. Someone will repay it in 5 or 7 years, but it's a little bit different perspective, a little longer term perspective.
Right. And durability is the name of the game in Built for Rent, as opposed to in the for sale business. You don't have to worry about it as much. But from the standpoint of, you want your turnover costs to be as low as possible. You want the turnover to be an efficient process. You want your houses to last for a long time. And so you do see materials too, like luxury vinyl plank flooring, which is becoming ubiquitous because it's so good at resisting pet scratches and spills and things like that. And a lot of dog owners are looking at these Built for Rent opportunities. Kelly, what's your percentage of tenants that have dogs? You have that off the top of your head?
I think it's going to be very high. I mean, I think that's the premium, especially again, we're really focused on a detached private yard housing type for our Built for Rent product. Yep. We expect most of our tenants will have pets or intend to have pets if they don't yet. So
yeah, that's what I'm seeing all around the country in our studies. It's very, very heavily pet centric, and the millennials in general as a population, as a segment of the population, tend to have dogs more than other generations. So I see another question from the audience. What efforts are you making to integrate smart home devices with operating workflow software? For example, self-guided tours, HVAC cost conservation, other ESG priorities. So kind of more on the business side of the technology.
Yeah, we're absolutely are using it for self-guided tour to our technology. We do that on our for sale side, and we've seen tremendous success with the self-touring technology across our business. So that would be a big part of our build for rent. I think we're working right now with our management partner to think about how we use the rest of our technology to, as Jeff mentioned, really understand how people are using our homes and can help to manage that. So I think we're still in the process of looking at more of the full integration through working with our management partner on that side.
And then what about floor plans for either of you? Certain things that I see being proposed are pocket offices for the built for, or for the, work from home trend, ways to access the mechanicals so that if you have a tenant and you don't want to go traipsing through their living room, you can have a mechanic go through the garage or some other somewhat exterior entrance to get to the air conditioner equipment or what have you. How are you thinking about floor plans and just design in general?
We're definitely focused on efficiency of our floor plan. So, compared to our for sale brand, cutting out maybe some of the fat on the square footage, making sure that it's very, again, highly efficient from not only a cost standpoint, but a building and construction standpoint, which I guess goes hand in hand there. So, efficiency of the floor plan is critical. We are thinking about garage storage is something, especially as we're seeing people have more and more storage needs. So making sure we have some storage opportunities in the homes. If we can have a niche, we try to have a floor plan or two in our lineup that has that work from home opportunity, whether it be enclosed or at least somewhat private or semi-private. So we are seeing that, that continue to be a desired feature for our homes. And we're really doing 3 to 4 bedrooms. So we see a lot of people really that 3rd bedroom or 4th bedroom is their home office space, given the larger floor plan types.
Yeah. I think from our perspective, from an overall program, I think it ends up looking relatively similar to a lot of the single family we build. I think we see that trend in terms of office spaces kind of generally, with both for sale and for rent. I think the trend from a design perspective that I'm kind of excited by is it's in our name, simple homes. I do believe that there is both a market and I just think it makes sense to build kind of frequently more simplified structures, and that American residential architecture frequently has a lot of, call it non-value add in the design that adds complexity and makes projects harder to build and ultimately makes them less durable over time. And I think part of what we've been excited about in this space is there's been, I think, a greater willingness on the part of builders, owners to say, can we simplify the form a bit that ultimately allows us to manage costs better and manage cycle time better? And then, maybe we are investing a little bit more in some of the exterior finishes, maybe slightly nicer windows, a nicer siding package to be able to deliver a product that still looks awesome, but has a little bit simpler form than I think a lot of the market perceives as required in the for sale side. So it's slightly a passion of mine. It's just simpler residential design, and so I think it's been exciting to see that and to have those conversations in a kind of greater way than we frequently do on the for sale side.
Yeah, I agree. We're focused on a more traditional neighborhood form for a built for a community, some more of that front porch living. I think, Jeff, as I've looked at your website, very, very aligned with the type of product you build. And, we really have our roots in urban infill housing. So I think that shows in our built for rent product, and it's simple. It is a more simple structure, but again, the orientation to the street, the addition of the porch, all of those things, I think add a lot of value in consumers, both for sale and for rent value, that traditional neighborhood feel.
Yeah, I feel like to some extent, I don't exactly know why, but I think allows folks to focus, us all collectively to focus a little bit more on really pure value creation of that front porch is an essential feature of that neighborhood and of that community that is absolutely worth investing in. And, you know, are there other places where maybe we're making some investments that don't add as much value to the end customer? So.
Well, thinking of a topic that sort of straddles technology and houses, have you had more call for electric vehicle charging stations in your units? And are you incorporating any of these into your units or installing infrastructure to be ready for when more demand appears for electric cars?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say, I don't think we've seen much explicit demand within the build for rent space there. I will say that here in Colorado, we're increasingly seeing that as a municipal requirement. In the city of Denver, you have to have wiring for an electric car for any garage or ADU, which is where we started, or single family home that you're building. So definitely a trend we're seeing. I don't think I've seen it too much more in this space.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
we have not considered that at this point in our build for rent product lineup. We do have some infill build for rent product that we're working on that might be a candidate for electrical vehicle charging. We are doing that very broadly in our for sale housing lineup, though. That it's we have a lot of our homeowners choose to add that feature.
Yeah, it's probably not very expensive to add, right?
No, I don't have the cost of it, but it's not.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So Kelly, you mentioned something I meant to ask you earlier when you mentioned it. You don't include washers and dryers in your built for rent units, right? Why? What's your thought process behind that? And do you ever get tenants saying, you know, this is kind of a pain, I got to bring my own washer dryer, take it with me when I go?
You know, I think that's again a management call, that seeing the long-term operations and maintenance of washers and dryers and potential for residual issues, you know, if they malfunction. I think that comes from our management partner that has a lot of history operating lots of units across the country, that, you know, has helped inform that decision.
Got it. So here's one from a member of the audience. How has the supply chain, lack of materials, and cost fluctuations changed how you're speccing out your projects?
Well, I mean, I'd say we're just focused on those relationships with suppliers that we know can deliver. You know, I think a lot of getting through the supply chain issues is just it comes down to those relationships and people that you can trust to deliver.
Sure, makes sense.
I think for us, and we've actually even seen this outside of our own scope of work, it's I think a desire, an interest, and a willingness to actually proceed with buying materials upfront in very large quantities. You know, I think that, you know, for us, for example, you know, our two largest build for rent projects, I mean, those customers are buying that material upfront entirely for the lumber pack months and months before we actually start framing. And so, you know, being willing to sort of outlay that cash up front to be able to manage both price risk and availability risk is, I think, something generally in the market is different now than a few years ago. And, you know, I know that, you know, our customer on our largest project, for example, is doing the same thing with a bunch of different SKUs. And they're basically saying, you know, they have the mandate from the owner, we want to eliminate as much risk as we can here. And so if that's what you need to do, that is, you need 10 containers full of windows or of whatever, and we need to pay a storage fee associated with that, we'll do it, because the impact of not having that material is greater than the sort of like cash flow impact of bringing some of those purchases forward, which is, you know, I think a kind of wonky product of the weird supply chain times that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, we've gone from
We're
just in
looking at that same kind of on-site storage of key materials. You know, so we're looking at some of those same things, but hasn't necessarily changed the products that we've spec'd. It's more how we're ordering them and delivering them to the site.
Yeah, yeah. The hot button used to be just-in-time inventory. Now it's just-in-case inventory.
Yeah.
Yep.
So here's a kind of a blue sky question. It's not really in either of your wheelhouse, but I'll throw it out anyway. 3D printing of houses. How big might that get? Do you have an opinion on what the potential is there?
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. I mean, I think there's definitely potential there, and I think some of the projects that have recently come online are really exciting. I think, you know, I probably so far haven't seen this sort of how it translates really broad scale commercial success in our market. I think there's just really substantial barriers from a regulatory perspective in particular. And from a customer adoption standpoint, I think the customer adoption piece is ultimately more solvable. And that's where something like a build for rent market, I think could be an interesting sandbox to say, let's try something that maybe we don't know if it's going to work on a for sale side. But I think there's definitely potential there. And been interested to see, particularly outside of the US, like some icons work they've done in Mexico has been really interesting, where they've been able to find a sandbox. It's a little less regulated to be able to work out the process, you know, before coming here in mass scale.
Yeah, I mean,
Dennis, you can chime in too.
No, please. I'm actually here to put you in the hot seat, Brad. So I'll let Kelly run with that one.
no, I was going to say, I think there's some really interesting solutions, and I think in very high cost housing markets, I could see, you know, some of those solutions gaining some more momentum and traction. And I think in build for rent, as you think about people that are really focused on more of that horizontal apartment, cottage style build for rent product, that would be a great testing ground, I think, for some of the 3D printed housing solutions that are out there, because there's some really great technology out there. But I think there are a lot of barriers, as Jeff described.
Now, I think, you know, I've had this conversation with a few members of our network, just to add in, you know, I think if you look at, this is the best consumer touch point to test it out, right? I mean, you can build a much simpler design. You can get people into something that might feel and look a little different. But I think this is a great way to introduce these concepts, and I think you could see it be a part of the technology solution mix as we go forward. I mean, it's taken a long time for Modular, Panelized to even have any, and I mean, most would say it doesn't even have significant traction yet, right? And as an integrated solution, but when it works really well. I'm curious on that question, Brad, as you're working with some of your clients, what's the conversation sound like from an innovation perspective on different building systems or 3D printing?
Yeah, honestly, it doesn't beyond sort of the typical smart thermostats and smart doorbells and all of that. I see it as so far being a fairly slow uptake and a fairly small segment of the market that's really focused on this. I do think that the people who are the most forward thinking are the ones that are going to come out ahead in the long run. And right now, it's fairly easy. Like, you know, for the past 24, 36 months, everybody's a genius, right? Every project that gets done built for rent works like, you know, gangbusters, and they raise their rents way above the, you know, pro forma. And seen some projects where they were escalating, you know, 11, 15, 16%. And you know, the demand was such that they were all leasing up instantaneously as fast as the units are being delivered. But I think that over the next 24 to 36 months, we're going to have to start thinking about who's going to come out on top, who's going to come out ahead because they figured out a way to build homes that cost less in the long run, cost less to turn over. You know, maybe also the amenity mix is going to be important, and the product stratification, diversification. If everybody builds in the, you know, East Nashville, and everybody builds the same product, there'll be a problem in East Nashville. But if we're spreading out a little bit, and also, even if we're not spreading out, at least offer something that's a little different from the guy that's down the street, and that'll keep you from having any issues with, I don't see any issues of oversupply in the next 6 or 7 years. In fact, I think we're going to be continuing to chase demand. And as you know, I have an opinion about, I'm not trying to monopolize here, but I have an opinion about the number of built for rent units that are already in process in this country. I think that we're at 95,000, 100,000 last year, going to 120,000 units this year, which is way higher than most of the articles and accounts are being quoted, because a lot of people are misusing the census data on that. But point is, it's going to be a growing market. There's more competitors coming, so look for ways to stand out. And I think technology is going to be one of the key ways to do that. And honestly, I think that modular panelized is going to be one of the keys that's going to be part of that. And so I'll turn that into a question for actually the panel. In general, how much do you think that the modular solutions have to come down in cost, based on quotes you're currently getting, perhaps, to make it realistic for you or other companies in this business to go even farther in that direction than you already are, or they already are? And on the flip side of that, how much more would your rents have to rise in order to make the economics work if you kind of went full on with modular? That's from George Casey too.
I guess
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah,
You lead.
I can lead off there. I was talking both about modular and panelized. I think that to me, the barrier to adoption is much less on the sort of intrinsic cost of the product, and it's kind of a chicken or the egg challenge in terms of the dynamics around adopting the product itself. You look at whether it's modular or panelized, there are little pockets of the US where those are kind of the dominant typologies in terms of how folks build. San Antonio has tons of panelized construction. Parts of Florida has tons of panelized construction, even though those are really low cost labor markets. You have parts of the mid-Atlantic where you have really high adoption of modular. And so I think that overall, whatever the solution is, but the inherent economics are ultimately workable. A modular factory can produce a box at a much lower cost per square foot in terms of the work content than it can be produced on site. But the friction always comes down to the intersection with the trades and the intersection with that on-site component. So, if you've got to string together 4 boxes and, connect all the wiring and the electrical there, convincing that electrical sub who's never done a modular product before to charge you a reasonable amount of money to do that work, particularly in a market where everyone's busy and is like, I can go make way more money on this really easy project down the street, is hard until you get a few reps, and then that electrical sub's done 5 of those buildings, is like, great, yeah, I know this is a quick project and I make good money, and I know how to price that accurately. And so I think that to me, in terms of kind of industrialized construction systems, be it modular, be it panelized, whatever, that's kind of the biggest barrier on the cost side.
Yeah, I agree. It's much less about the actual just cost of construction versus for modular versus traditional on-site. And, I think it is everything Jeff mentioned, just the overall friction in the system. And, when I think about true modular, really committing early in the design phase, even without knowable production capacity. And that's really where we kind of, we can't decide to move forward, right? Because we're committing very early on in a design phase to something that just feels very unknown and scary. And especially, as Jeff said, in the recent environment, to get your trades to consider trying to do something new. It's hard to get them to do what they've been doing forever, right? And have enough labor to do that. So I think that's really been more of the issue of adoption than just the dollars and cents.
Yeah, it really is a chicken or the egg issue. And here's a question from the audience for Jeff. Assuming your solution is more effective in the higher coast markets, West Coast areas, Colorado, California, et cetera, versus lower cost markets like San Antonio, Atlanta, in those lower cost markets, how does your solution compare with on-site traditional framing? You're on mute.
It's kind of exactly what I said earlier. I think that it comes down to the trade base in those markets. And
right.
You know, for example, San Antonio is like this fascinating place where within Texas, you don't have a huge adoption of panelized generally, but you have a very high adoption in San Antonio, specifically because you've got framers who that's just how they are used to building. And so, I think that for us, ultimately, our solution, can be competitive in pretty much any of those markets. And part of the reason why we're able to do that is that we, even though we operate in Colorado today, is that we do control that field labor as well. And so we ultimately the kind of like labor arbitrage that exists in terms of your factory labor and field labor, and then also managing that sort of adoption challenge and that adoption risk. That's why we've said we're gonna own both sides of the coin there. We're gonna own the manufacturing, and then we're gonna own the field install as well.
We talked a little bit about, you mentioned it, Kelly, the cottage style, horizontal multifamily, single plat type of development. I know that's not what you guys do, but what is your opinion on where that sits in the market relative to, sort of typical single family?
I think there's such a housing need that there's room for all. I think they just serve different consumers. The horizontal apartment is a bit of a bridge to me between traditional multifamily garden style apartments and kind of what we're doing in the build for rent space. So it might be a smaller family size, or it's the pet owner without the kids. It's just a different customer. But I really think that there's room for everybody to be successful given the housing need generally.
And what kinds of yard spaces are you offering in your communities, both of you, or what do you think is kind of the sweet spot for outdoor space?
It's not large. I would say it might be 20 by 20. It's a relatively small area, and that might be large in some of our communities. It really is that spot to let your dog out. It's the fenced in area to let your pet out. A little private outdoor patio in some of our communities, depending on the space that we have. Trying to provide that pet space and that private outdoor space for someone to enjoy. But they're not large spaces. Again, we are focused on having the front porch living as well. So having the private yard plus that front porch feel is really kind of a key to what we're doing on the product side.
Sure.
Yeah, and in our market here, we see, it's lots and lots of townhomes. So attached single family, that's kind of the dominant product within the build for rent space that we've seen and that we're building. And from an outdoor space, it tends to be very, very small yard, or kind of surprisingly, some projects where there's actually no yard, but a large deck, for example, that overhangs it.
In your projects, or so your competitor, some of the other
projects we're working on right now are a lot of that, which is a little surprising to me.
Okay. Thinking about the smaller yards, how does that impact what kind of community amenities need to be offered?
So we are offering a more limited amenity package. We do have in some of our neighborhoods that are closer to 200 homes, a small pool. We do try to do pocket parks, again, following the more traditional neighborhood design of our communities, walking paths, kind of more passive outdoor recreation, a small kind of clubhouse facility that really services the pool as well. But it's generally a much more limited amenity package that we're offering in our communities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that basic lifestyle that people really want more than the pool and clubhouse. They want the yard and a little bit of privacy. So thinking about the innovation tipping point, what is one innovation or technology that you're interested in seeing tested more in the market? And is there anything in particular that you're working on yourselves or contemplating for the future?
Well, we already touched on this, but I'm really excited to see solar, how we can use solar in a variety of contexts. And then really, again, have the data to track it. As Jeff talked about, I think that could be really powerful for long-term adoption of solar in, in different contexts. And again, isn't something that was in our thought process before we launched the build for rent line. So if I had to say one, it'd be solar.
Okay. So I see a question in the chat, somebody asking me to expand on my view of annualized build for rent starts. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because our focus is really supposed to be on innovation, but I'm going to be posting more on that in LinkedIn as well as on our website, hunterhousingeconomics.com. So there'll be a lot more that I'll discuss that and put. I have some slides on social media that kind of quickly explain the thesis. So let me go to another question from the audience. How does security play into your design, and thinking of both in terms of the houses themselves and the community?
We aren't doing gated communities typically. Not to say we never would. Again, we have the video doorbell and some of those smart home features that I do think provide a level of security and visibility on, your home, but we're not looking really adding any security systems or anything more advanced at this point.
All right. Another question from the audience is not really technology per se, but might be interesting to delve into because I think a lot of people might want to know about it. Parking counts. How are parking counts different in built for rent versus for sale residential homes? And how do you think about garages, I guess, is kind of a corollary to that?
Yeah, everything we're building has an attached garage. We think that's a key part of our product offering. They're typically rear load. So we are actually, again, in my prior comment about the need for storage, really thinking throughout our site design, the additional guest parking spaces, either via a driveway that's accessed via an alley, or making sure that we have appropriate on-street parking. From an entitlement standpoint, because we are going and entitling these as built for rent. We have guest parking requirements and some stricter parking requirements than we would if we were doing a typical for sale development.
That actually leads to another question. If we kind of roll that up a little bit, so build for rent obviously skates the line between kind of multifamily and a for sale product in many jurisdictions. Are there any other barriers that you've had to get creative in kind of problem solving or educating the municipalities and kind of how to think about this product offering as you move forward and talk about, or are there some that you're facing you need some help with that we can reach out to the network with?
Well, I would say, it is, communities are trying to figure it out. And I think part of a challenge going in and entitling a build for rent project as a standalone project is I think they're still understanding even the single family rental capacity in their jurisdictions and how are we the same or different, as I think communities are starting to understand that they already have it, whether they realize it or not. It's in their communities, and so I think there is a lot of education that we're doing about the need for this housing type. Typically, we are higher density than what the single family for sale zoning would allow. So, we're working through that, which means sometimes even on a detached, what is going to look like a traditional neighborhood, we're doing it as a single plat because of entitlement issues with doing the lot sizes that we really need to do to accommodate our product type. So, I think that there is a lot of education to be done about these different housing types. And I think communities are trying to get their arms around what they mean and, you know, what the demand is. So it's a challenge on the entitlement front for sure.
It sounds ongoing learning process.
Mhm.
Right.
I got another question. As you think about, one thing I think about often is that you have to consider what the tenant wants, but also what the buyer of the project is going to want, that end investor that's at the end of this process for those who develop and then sell. So, and part of that also touches on ESG capital and their priorities. Are there ways to think about innovation technology that can particularly appeal to the ESG capital? And kind of a follow-on question is, do you, and maybe more for you, Jeff, is on the townhomes, are you seeing a lot of demand for 2-bedroom, or is it more 3-bedroom? And that kind of relates to not just the tenants, but also the buyers at the end. Either of you.
Yeah. I mean, I guess on the kind of program side, I'd say much more of a preference towards 3-bedroom is what we've seen. The project we're working on and the ones we've looked at, you know, some mix of 2 bedrooms, but majority 3 bedrooms is at least what we've seen here. And then, you know, I think to your question on kind of the ESG side, and I just saw this question pop up in the chat as well, you know, about kind of all electric. That to me, you know, I think to the earlier question of like innovations that could be interesting coming out of this, or, you know, that could be scaled more generally, I see that as a really interesting piece where maybe some builders haven't been willing to like take that step overall, but would be willing to do it in a build for rent context. We've seen one project that's not, you know, mega, like, you know, 50-ish units that going all electric. And I think that could be really cool to see going forward.
Yeah,
They are all electric. I honestly didn't realize that was innovative until the question. So it just shows how regionalized, you know, different housing markets are different. So, you know, I think, Brad, your question that in terms of long-term ownership and capital, I think that ESG is very important. I think incorporating green principles, having green certifications, you know, thinking about sustainable technologies, materials, all of that is really important from a long-term.
And I agree with you, Jeff, too. I'm seeing more demand in the market for 3-bedroom than 2-bedroom townhomes. And in particular, the end buyers are, I think, more attracted to the 3-bedroom versus the 2, because the 2s compete, you know, you face competition from the multifamily much more. So that's part of that as well. Dennis, do we have time for one more question, or are we kind of up against our finish time?
No, we usually roll to about 3:15. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew we had a chance to get a few last questions into the hopper here. So I'm happy to jump into some of these. I think you started touching on this ESG question that Corey Donahue just submitted. We can kind of elaborate on that and then touch any final ones and then wrap up.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody have any final thoughts on the ESG aspect?
You know, I think, you know, from in the chat there, you know, so Corey just added that, you know, is this a big conversation with you and your client, amongst your clients and your institutional partners? And then I guess if it is, are you starting to recognize a willingness to pay a premium for the long-term reduction in operating costs? So this is ties back to some what we discussed a little bit earlier, but happy to, if there's anything else that either one of you'd like to elaborate on, happy to hear it.
I don't know if I got cut off there. I think I froze for a
up.
minute, but I was just going to say that I do think that ESG is important long-term for capital, and you know, we think long-term for pricing and cap rates down the line. You know, we're not merchant developing our built for rent communities, but we do think there's long-term value in incorporating ESG principles up front.
And then how does that dovetail, or how does any of this dovetail with green building methods? How do you think that affects the market, the ESG aspect, the tenants, and just, costs?
I guess I see them all intertwined. I guess when I'm mentioning ESG, I think it is including those green building techniques. I think whether tenants are willing to pay for them is to be determined. I think as we've looked even on the for sale side and some market research on the for sale side, is people say they would, but do they actually? I'm not sure. I think we're still trying to figure out if tenants will. Now, maybe if we can equate it to dollars saved in their utility bills, as many they're paying their own utilities and things of that nature in these communities, it may.
Yeah, I think that's you bring an interesting point up there, Kelly. I think right now a lot of it seems a lot of survey responses are done by heart, but the leases are signed with the wallet. So and I think we're starting to see that change over time, but I think right now there still seems to be quite a divergence in those in what we're hearing and what action's being taken. It's interesting, but I think we're more cognizant of it than we've ever been, and certainly, as you mentioned, we've done a lot of the alliances. We follow the money, and there's metrics coming along from capital partners, and these principles are being embedded in their investment thesis, and that's going to help to dictate, I think, the clearer roadmap we all have to follow. And the more consistency in standardization in the process, the better off we all be, because then we'll actually know how to be measured for and the partners that we want to align with.
I had asked a question earlier about floor plans, and I'm curious, when I think about design, and I think this is more of a townhome question, 1-car garage versus 2. If you go with 1-car garage, can you create a more efficient floor plan? And do you feel like the market will pay you more for that? Or does that market really just want the extra space that a 2-car or 1+ car garage would bring?
Yeah. I mean, I think in our market, we've seen a mix of both. So we've got some projects that are, more, I guess, directly suburban, closer to the city, more kind of an larger infill parcel. That's where we've seen a lot more of, 1 car with a 3-bedroom, kind of 3-story concept. We've got a couple other projects we've been looking at that are a little bit further afield, a little more exurban. And that's where it seemed to be more of the 2-bedroom or the 2-car garage, 2-story with the garage kind of on the back. So it's really, I think we've seen both, but it's pretty well defined based on kind of the geographic location within the city.
Yeah, we're really focused on that 2-car garage. We think that's important. Even if they're going to use one space as for storage, I think there's still more value in it appearing to be a 2-car garage.
Yeah, that's right. Because the people that are making a step up out of apartments and moving to a rental townhome or even a cottage or a single family detached home, they not so much the cottages, but the single family and the townhomes these are people who need space, and that's part of the proposition for why they're moving up out of an apartment and into, even out of a three-bedroom apartment into a 3-bedroom townhome or 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom detached home, because they can have more space to be able to work from home, for the kids to go to school, do their homework from home, and just to have more space, even if they're not families. If they're divorced people, they have more stuff than people who've never been married. So they're going to have that storage need. So storage is definitely a big deal. There's no doubt about it. What's another aspect of innovation? I was going to kind of throw open a wide open question. What's a type of innovation that you think is going to be in the news 12 months from now? whether it's in built for rent or just any kind of residential development? I know, open-ended question. I'll kind of ramble for a moment while you're thinking about that, because I think one of the things that neither of you is involved with that I think is a relatively brand new innovation in community design is the horizontal multifamily. It really didn't exist before built for rent happened. And so I think if nothing else, it just stands as a good example of how built for rent is kind of that fulcrum or lever for, as we called in the title of this program, a tipping point for innovation. It is an innovative approach because it allows you to create density of 10, 12 to the acre with detached homes, which really hadn't been done before 2011, 2012. And so I don't know what the next big innovation is going to be, but that's kind of the root of my question.
I think one of the things we'll start to see, Brad, is more innovation on the financial structure of, I think, so speaking to, built for rent as a business model that we've been exploring, you're starting to already see surveys show up in the Wall Street Journal about how, millennials and Gen Z are much more willing to rent a room in their house just to be able to afford to purchase the home. A year and a half ago, we were talking about building ADUs to be able to purchase the home. Now we're bringing people into the home environment. I think we're going to continue to see that evolve. And again, fractional ownership structures and different programs that I think didn't quite get the traction they deserved within the low interest rate environment. As you saw home prices spiking, they started to get more and more interesting. And now I think with the increasing in interest rates as an offset, you're going to start to see different ways in which we can purchase homes or at least get into kind of get that initial equity grab to establish a position. So I think that'll be there. And I think continuing to see models around, continuing to see exploration through this built for rent segment. As you said, it's such a big piece of the market. And it's growing to be a significant piece of the market. So I think we're going to continue as with your numbers, which we've talked through a couple of times. I think that adds a lot of opportunity to change the lifestyle kind of program for people that that have different preferences.
Yeah, and then the leasing technology too, just being able to leverage technology so that people can take self-guided tours, and I'm seeing that in a lot of projects. And then pocket offices, I think, or just the technology that goes along with it, the high-speed connections, that just having a space or an area in the house. It doesn't even have to be really a full pocket office. It could be just a place where there are the high-speed outlets and multiple outlets, and just a place where you could set up a computer workstation, and maybe it's a fold-away kind of space or a nook that is just designed for kind of occasional use or without taking up an entire room. But I think that as people study from home more and work from home more, that's probably going to be something that's going to expand over the next 12 months, in my point of view.
Kelly and Jeff, anything you want to add to that one before we wrap up?
Yeah, I guess I'll say a couple of things. I mean, one, I do think that we're going to continue to see, innovation and continued news and, advancement within the 3D printing space. I think that's just such an early space right now that it's going to be cool to see that evolve over the next 12 months. One place where I guess I nerd out in particular a bit is on, foundations, methods to speed up that part of the cycle time, whether it be it, it's prefab concrete foundations. In our market, we're starting to see a little bit more of like prefab composite foundations. Scandinavia builds with these really fascinating kind of like it's a frost protected slab on grade with prefab forms. So I don't know if you'll see like a huge amount of news about it because it's nerdy and niche, but I think that that there's a lot of potential there from both the cycle time savings and ultimately I think that there's a fair amount of costs there as those technologies scale.
what I'm hearing loud and clear from this whole discussion, and just kind of wrap up some of my takeaways, is saving time, cycle time. As I said, all these developments that we're studying are leasing up as fast as they can be built and delivered. And on the investment side, the platforms, the investment companies that are paying builders to build homes for them, they're wanting those homes to be built as fast as possible. So the technologies and the innovations that you're both employing, Kelly and Jeff, are absolutely critical. I think to the extent that you're employing new processes and thinking ahead about what the next new process is going to be that can reduce cycle time, get those homes delivered faster, there is a shortage. We are chasing the demand in this build for rent sector. So, what you're doing at Simple Homes, Jeff, your Swedish inspired offsite construction, you're ramping up your production, and I've watched your videos and it's fascinating. I think that these are key parts of what needs to be done in terms of innovation in order to deliver enough housing to meet the needs out there.
Great. Is there any, just to close up, and I appreciate that wrap up there, Brad, I'm just curious, does anybody have any final call to action for our organization? Again, we heard the speed, we've heard capacity early on, Kelly. There was, one of the things I thought that was really interesting, Jeff, that you brought up was this willingness to have kind of some joint development with your clients. So, here's a major hurdle, here's how we can work together. Let's open the books a bit and figure out how we do that. And there's going to be some fail forwards in the process, but the scale of the challenge or the opportunity ahead makes this all make sense. So I'm just curious if there's anything else that you'd throw out there as a bit of a call to action for our network as we continue to pursue this opportunity together.
Dennis, I think one of the things that you already do well, and I know it's something you'll continue to do, is really bringing these parties together. So I did not know Jeff until this call, and you continuously bring innovative producers and new ideas to the table, so that in my day-to-day, I don't always get to go and search for maybe what that next solution is. And so I appreciate the connectedness that you and the Alliance bring between kind of what's happening and what's coming, because I do think there's so much opportunity. And I love, I wish I was closer to Denver where I could work with Jeff on a project. And so how do I find, the person in my markets that has a solution that might work? I think, continuing to help connect those dots is going to be critical, especially as we move towards modular and offsite construction.
Okay, great. Well, the good news is we're going to keep doing what we do, Kelly. So appreciate the support and your contributions throughout this process. Jeff and Brad, any call to action here?
I don't want to sound like broken record, but ditto what Kelly said. I think that bringing together both, just on this call, we've got, kind of 3 different perspectives and parts of the market and ways to think about this challenge. And then, 3 different market perspectives and sort of geography too. And so I think that kind of mix of geography and then folks doing different stuff in the space, which is what you guys do best. That's what we need.
Okay, great. Thanks. Brad?
Yeah, I think that it's just a holistic approach. I think it's got to be a little bit of everything. We need to keep thinking and keep open minds about technologies and things that, right now it feels like 3D printing is, pie in the sky. It's not widely adopted, widely used yet. But I remember the day when I heard, many years ago, I heard, well, cell phones are going to be the big thing. I was like, oh, I'm fine. I can just wait till I get home and make the phone call, So it's going to be fascinating to see what evolves over the next year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. The home building industry is not one that's known for being innovative. over the past 40, 50 years. The process of building a home really hasn't changed that much until the last 10, 15 years. And now we've started to see these innovations and changes. So I think we are somewhat possibly at an inflection point or tipping point, as we've titled this webinar. So I think there could be some exciting things ahead.
Oh, no, right on. Well, I wish I could say that I had you arrange this plug, but it sounds like we're all thinking the same way. So I want to highlight a couple things that we're working on that I think will follow right into some of the core value that you're looking to continue to achieve from the network and help to create some of that connectivity. So I think as far as ideas around being able to keep an open mind and kind of keep pushing these concepts in front of our network, one of the things I'm most excited to announce is we have our first group road trip coming up at the June 21st and 22nd in St. Louis. So that'll be the first of 3 road trips that we're going to host throughout the course of this year, where we're going to bring everyone together. You can learn more about this event on our website, and please register there. Also, speaking to the connectivity point, we just launched a new tab for these virtual events and any event that we participate in, where you can actually see who attended the webinar or the virtual event that we've hosted, as well as any live event that they've logged into our website for. And if they are a member of our organization, you can actually connect with their profile and be able to get in touch with them. So again, as a way to kind of further some of that connectivity within our network and the industry, we put that forward. Just wanted to close out with this slide as it tied directly into a couple of the key points that I heard from each of you there. But before we part ways, just want to say thank you. I mean, this has been fantastic. I greatly appreciate Brad, Jeff, and Kelly coming together and sharing your perspectives on where the industry's heading, where the opportunities lies, what are some of the hurdles we need to look out for, and all the support you've given to our network over the past few years since we've gotten to work together. So thank you for that. And thank you to the entire audience for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you at the next Housing Innovation Alliance event.